Jake Callahan drove his old, well-worn SUV into the parking lot of Skyline Motors, a luxurious car dealership he had recently acquired in the heart of New York City. The warm afternoon sun beat down on the showroom's gleaming luxury cars, their polished bodies reflecting the sunlight, giving off an almost ethereal glow. The bustling cityscape surrounding the dealership contrasted sharply with the quiet, pristine interior that awaited inside. As he parked in an inconspicuous space in the back of the lot, Jake took a moment to look around, his eyes scanning the building's sleek, modern exterior. He was here on a mission, to see how his new business was running without anyone knowing who he truly was. Jake's attire was deliberately casual, a gray hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers. He wasn't here to make an impression or flaunt his wealth. Rather, he wanted to experience the dealership from the eyes of a typical customer. In his years of experience in business, he'd learned that the true culture of any organization could be seen when no one knew the boss was watching. With a deep breath, he stepped out of the vehicle, noting the sharp contrast between the scorching heat of the city streets and the cool air-conditioned showroom awaiting him inside. As Jake approached the entrance, he could hear the low hum of conversation and laughter coming from the employees near the front desk, their voices echoing softly through the glass doors. A small smile tugged at his lips. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He wasn't just about to buy a car. He was about to observe the very people who would unknowingly shape his experience at Skyline Motors. Jake pushed the door open and walked inside, blending in effortlessly with the showroom's quiet elegance. The scent of freshly waxed cars and leather filled the air as the showroom lights illuminated rows of high-end cars. Little did the staff know, the man they just noticed in a hoodie was the very person who owned the entire place. As Jake stepped into the showroom, the first thing he noticed was the stark contrast between the outside world and the cool, serene interior. The cars were immaculate, each one gleaming under the bright lights, and the scent of fresh leather lingered in the air. He could hear the faint hum of chatter and laughter coming from a group of employees gathered near the front desk. Their relaxed voices were a subtle indication of the dealership's usual rhythm, but as Jake walked through the entrance, their casual conversation died down almost instantly. He felt their eyes on him, their gaze scanning his simple hoodie and sneakers. The energy in the room shifted, and Jake could feel it. An unspoken judgment had already begun. Jake took his time, pretending to admire a few of the luxury cars on display. He noted the polished finishes and the way each model seemed designed to project power and wealth. But what caught his attention more than the cars themselves was the way the employees reacted to him. A young man in a suit glanced at Jake with raised eyebrows before quickly turning away. A middle-aged woman behind the desk subtly adjusted her posture, her gaze lingering just a moment too long. It was as if they were unsure of how to approach someone dressed so casually in a place where appearance was everything. His decision to dress down wasn't random. Jake had spent years in the corporate world, observing and learning how people judged one another based on appearance alone. He had grown tired of that shallow judgment and wanted to experience Skyline Motors firsthand, without the barrier of wealth or status to cloud the interactions. As he strolled past the rows of high-end cars, Jake couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. There was something about the showroom's atmosphere that felt cold, distant, a stark contrast to the warmth and approachability he wanted to foster. This wasn't the experience he envisioned as he is for a luxury dealership. Just then the store manager, Karen, appeared at the far end of the showroom, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. Jake observed her carefully, wondering what her first impression of him would be. Madison Carter was the embodiment of elegance and authority in the high-stakes world of luxury car sales. With her perfectly tailored suits and polished demeanor, she commanded respect the moment she walked into a room. As the head sales manager at Prestige Motors, Madison had been with the dealership for over a decade, and her reputation for getting things done was both admired and feared. She ran the showroom with an iron fist, making sure that only those who looked the part were welcomed with open arms. For Madison, appearances were everything. Status, wealth, and power were the only things that truly mattered. She moved through the dealership with the grace of someone who knew they were in control. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floors, and her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the showroom for any potential threat to her authority. To her, Jake was a mere inconvenience, a man who had walked in dressed casually, blending into the crowd of high-end customers. She didn't see him as a serious buyer. To her, he was an anomaly, someone who didn't fit the mold of a luxury car client. She couldn't help but judge him based on his appearance, a decision that was almost instinctual. Madison's eyes flicked over Jake when he entered, immediately categorizing him as someone beneath her notice. His simple hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers were a far cry from the tailored suits and designer attire she was accustomed to seeing in her showroom. She barely made an effort to mask her skepticism as she approached him, her smile tight and forced, the type of smile she gave to people who were wasting her time. As Madison made her way towards Jake, she quickly calculated her next move. She had to maintain control, make sure that he understood that this place was for those who could afford to be here, those who truly belonged. What she didn't know was that Jake had no intention of backing down from her assumptions. As Jake wandered through the sleek showroom, his calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to Madison's growing sense of discomfort. He was no longer a simple customer. He was a challenge, someone who had the audacity to dress down in a place that prided itself on exclusivity. Madison's eyes narrowed as she watched him, her mind already making assumptions about who he was, or more precisely, who he wasn't. To her, the hoodie, the jeans, and the sneakers were a clear sign of someone who didn't belong. When she approached him, her every step was calculated, her eyes scanning his clothes as if they were a reflection of his entire being. She couldn't help but look down on him. After all, this wasn't just a car dealership, it was Prestige Motors. She was the head sales manager, and her role was to separate the worthy from the unworthy. To her, Jake's casual appearance meant he wasn't a serious buyer. He probably didn't even know the cost of the vehicles lining the showroom. "Can I help you with something?" Madison's voice was polite but laced with an edge, her gaze fixed on him with the unmistakable air of someone accustomed to control. Jake responded with an easy smile, as if he weren't fazed by her demeanor. "Just looking around," he replied, his tone casual. Madison's lips tightened, a flash of impatience crossing her features. "Are you shopping for a car or just wasting your time here?" she asked, not bothering to hide the judgment in her voice. Jake's response was nonchalant, his words gentle but pointed. "Something like that," he said, his eyes glancing around the showroom before landing back on her. The question caught Madison off guard. She quickly regained her composure, but the disapproval lingered in her voice as she continued. "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele here. Our inventory requires pre-qualification," she said, looking down at him with an air of superiority. "Perhaps I could recommend somewhere more affordable?" Her words were a thinly veiled dismissal. Jake wasn't the kind of person who would have the means to buy the luxury cars in this showroom, and Madison's assumptions about him only grew more solid with each passing moment. Little did she know, Jake wasn't about to let her underestimation slide. Finally, with a deep breath, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I, I'm sorry, I misjudged you. I made assumptions I shouldn't have. I can see now that I was wrong." The apology hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. Jake nodded, acknowledging her words, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't just about saying sorry. It was about showing change, and Madison knew she had a long way to go to earn back the trust she had lost. As the tension in the conference room began to subside, Jake took control of the situation. The staff, though still a bit on edge, listened intently as he continued to speak. His calm demeanor had already conveyed a sense of leadership, but his words were about to solidify the direction he wanted to take. "Today's incident is more than just a misunderstanding," Jake began, his voice clear and unwavering. "It's a reflection of a deeper issue, one that we need to address if we're going to move forward as a team." His eyes briefly met Madison's, then swept across the group. Judging people based on appearances, regardless of their background, wealth, or status, is simply not acceptable. And it's not the standard I will accept at Prestige Motors. The employees shifted in their seats, some nodding in agreement, while others appeared uncertain. Jake paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing. "We're a business built on trust and respect. These values extend beyond the cars we sell. They define the experience we provide to our customers, and just as importantly, how we treat each other as a team." Madison, sitting near the back, felt a knot in her stomach. She was grateful for Jake's leadership, but also aware of the work that lay ahead. The damage had been done, but this was her chance to prove herself. She could already feel a shift in her mindset, a realization that being a leader wasn't just about having authority, but about ensuring inclusivity and fairness in every interaction. Jake turned his attention back to the room. From today onward, we're implementing a training program that focuses on empathy, understanding, and most importantly, challenging our own biases. I want every one of you to understand that our role here is more than just selling cars. It's about creating relationships based on trust and respect. Madison knew that this moment was pivotal, not just for her, but for everyone in the room. This was the beginning of something bigger than just a new ownership. It was a shift in culture, one that would demand accountability and mutual respect from every member of the team. Madison silently vowed to be part of that change, to prove that she could be better, for herself and for the dealership. In the weeks following the meeting, Madison worked tirelessly to implement the changes Jake had outlined. At first, the transition was challenging. The old habits, the judgmental glances, and the preconceived notions hadn't disappeared overnight. But something had shifted. Madison's determination to embody the new values set forth by Jake began to take root, not just in her, but in her interactions with the rest of the team. One morning, as Madison walked into the showroom, she noticed the difference immediately. The atmosphere was lighter, more welcoming. The usual tension had melted away, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. Employees were engaging with customers more openly, not with an air of superiority, but with genuine interest and respect. There was an openness to understanding each customer's needs, no matter their appearance or background. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Madison found herself at the forefront of this transformation. She had embraced the new training programs wholeheartedly, and her leadership was beginning to reflect that change. She actively engaged with the staff, always emphasizing the importance of empathy and the power of seeing people for who they truly were, not for what they wore or how they looked. One day, as she assisted a young couple in the showroom, Madison noticed a man in a casual jacket and jeans walking through the doors. His demeanor was calm, but there was something about him that stood out. He approached her with a soft smile and asked about a particular vehicle, speaking with an assurance that caught Madison's attention. Her instinct told her this wasn't just any customer. A few minutes later, Madison's suspicions were confirmed. The man, though unassuming in appearance, was the new regional director, someone she hadn't expected to see in such a setting. This time, instead of assuming his intentions, she treated him with the respect he deserved, just as she had done with every other customer that day. In that moment, Madison realized just how far she had come. The showroom had rebirthed into a place of inclusivity and fairness. And as she watched her staff engage with their customers, she knew this was the beginning of a lasting transformation for both the dealership and herself. As the tension in the showroom continued to rise, Madison felt a sense of control slowly slipping away from her. Jake had remained calm and composed despite her cold dismissals, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet confidence that she couldn't ignore. At first, she brushed it off, assuming he was just another customer who would eventually realize he didn't belong in a place like Prestige Motors. However, she was about to learn how wrong she was. Minutes later, the sound of the showroom doors opening broke the silence. A sharply dressed man walked in, his polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. His suit was immaculate, and his posture exuded authority. Madison's gaze immediately shifted toward him, ready to resume her duties with the air of someone in charge. But then, something happened that completely caught her off guard. The man walked directly up to Jake with a warm smile. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending his hand in greeting. "So good to see you." Madison froze. The words felt like a sharp slap to her face, and for a moment, everything in the showroom seemed to freeze. "Mr. Carter?" she thought. Who was Mr. Carter? Her eyes darted from Jake to the man, confusion clouding her thoughts. Jake shook his hand firmly, his expression unchanged, though there was a faint glint of amusement in his eyes. "Thanks for coming, Alex. I appreciate it," he said casually. The man, Alex, turned to her, his demeanor now professional, but tinged with an edge of coolness. "Susan," he began, addressing the sales manager directly, "I see you've already met Mr. Carter." The room seemed to hold its breath. Madison's face drained of color. She couldn't hide the shock in her expression as she looked from Alex to Jake. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Jake wasn't just any customer. He was the owner of the dealership, the very same man she had dismissed and underestimated. Madison's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her clipboard. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a moment that would define the rest of her career at Prestige Motors. The judgment she had passed on Jake was now exposed for what it truly was: ignorance, and worse, arrogance. The atmosphere in the showroom had shifted drastically. Madison's cheeks burned as she realized the mistake she had made. She had misjudged Jake in the most embarrassing way possible. With the weight of the situation pressing down on her, she found herself standing in the conference room, awaiting the inevitable confrontation. The employees had already gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort as they settled into their seats. Jake stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding the room. He had a quiet authority, an air of calm that contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from Madison. He glanced around at the staff before his eyes fell on her, and for the first time, Madison saw a hint of disappointment in his gaze. "Let me make one thing clear," Jake began, his voice steady but firm. "I didn't come here today to embarrass anyone. I came to understand the culture of this place, how it operates when no one knows who I am." He paused, allowing his words to settle. Madison's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, the gravity of the situation sinking deeper with every second. She had assumed that his casual attire meant he didn't belong in a luxury showroom. But she had been wrong. She had let her own biases blind her to the truth. Jake continued, his words sharp but fair. "What I saw today was disappointing. Judging people based on how they look or what they're wearing is not how we operate. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they appear to be." Madison swallowed hard, guilt flooding her chest. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She hadn't anticipated the gravity of her actions coming back to haunt her like this. As the dealership continued to thrive under Madison's leadership, an unexpected phone call arrived late one afternoon. Madison was sitting at her desk, going over plans for upcoming events, when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment but answered it, unsure of what to expect. "Madison, it's Claire," a familiar voice said. Claire had been a former colleague from a different dealership, one who had watched Madison's rise through the ranks. "I heard what you're doing at Prestige Motors. I've got something that might interest you." Madison's curiosity piqued. She'd respected Claire but hadn't expected a call like this. "What's going on, Claire?" "I've been offered an opportunity to lead a new luxury dealership in the city," Claire continued. "And they're looking for someone with your vision and leadership. They want someone who understands the importance of inclusivity and customer care. And frankly, I can't think of anyone better than you." Madison's heart raced. The idea of being headhunted was exhilarating, but it also felt unsettling. She had built something at Prestige Motors. The team, the customers, the culture, it had all started with her, and now things were finally starting to feel right. Could she leave it all behind for something new? "I'll think about it," Madison replied, her voice steady, but her mind spinning. Hanging up the phone, Madison sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. She knew this was a big moment, one that could shape her future in ways she hadn't anticipated. Would she stay and continue pushing for change at Prestige Motors? Or would she take the leap into a new venture, uncertain but filled with potential? The future was wide open, and Madison wasn't sure where it would take her next. But one thing was clear: she was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The story of Madison's journey at Prestige Motors offers a valuable lesson that can be applied to everyday life: the importance of humility, openness, and continuous self-improvement. In an environment where assumptions and judgments often cloud our perspectives, it's crucial to challenge these biases and create inclusive spaces where every individual is valued based on their character, not their appearance. Madison's ability to recognize her own flaws, seek personal growth, and ultimately create a culture of fairness shows that leadership is not about maintaining power but about uplifting others. In life, we must be willing to admit when we're wrong, seek constructive feedback, and be open to change. It's these qualities that truly drive success, whether in our personal relationships, careers, or communities. Madison's story reminds us that transformation starts within, and through accountability and openness, we can positively impact those around us.